Okay, we are live. Well, thank you for attending. Those are people who are live. I want to say a special thank you to Hub Online Network and Gareth for pulling it together so we can do a sound meeting.
Yeah, that's because the first minute and a half was no sound.
Okay.
Yeah, so now we're good.
Okay, excellent. Maybe we should lower down our mic so there's no feedback. Okay. Okay, let's get started. Town hall meeting. So first, as usual, some background information. Balanced budget. The community charter requires that the budget be balanced and presented annually. We have separate accounts and we follow fund accounting, and which means there's an account for general operations, there's an account for water operations, there's another group of accounts for sewer operations, and then there is reserves. So the general fund covers public works, streets and roads, protective services, our solid waste, which is garbage collection, administration, and recreation. I should remember to look at the camera. The water fund covers delivery of water, the water treatment, all the infrastructure in water, the pipes, the pump houses, reservoirs, and all the equipment involved in treating and delivering water. The sewer fund similarly covers collection, treatment, the infrastructure, which includes pipes, lift stations, and the new and improved treatment plant.
I'm sorry, I'm going to stop you there for a second.
Apparently the sound is very scratchy.
Okay, so if everybody at home can hear me, we're going to just take 4 minutes and figure out our sound. So bear with us. Technical difficulty, this is our first time doing this. We'll just be 2 to 4 minutes and I'll get this sorted. Just stay on mic. Okay, so take off your microphone. Barbara, take off your microphone.
I don't have a mic.
Yeah, put it on. Okay. Just hit the button on the front and turn it off.
Obviously not.
So, you're going to have to restart, Yogi.
Okay, I will restart.
Just 1 sec. So, I'm just going to stand here with you for 1 second. Trying to be physically distant. Sorry for the delay. We should be sorted out. Let us know if we're not. And back to Yogi.
Okay, I'll rewind a little bit. So, going to the beginning because the voice wasn't there. So, back to background information. So, we are mandated to have a balanced budget by the community charter, and we do every year, and it has to be presented annually. Fund accounting, that's what we follow under the public sector accounting rules, and there are separate accounts for general operations, water, sewer, and then there are a number of reserve accounts depending. Public works, streets and roads, protective services, solid waste, administration and recreation. And solid waste is our garbage collection. Water fund covers our delivery, treatment, infrastructure, pump houses and reservoirs, basically everything to do with water. It's segregated. Our main screen there has drawn a blank, but I'm going to leave it because you guys can see the presentation online. There. Let me try getting that piece of electronics going again. Just a moment, folks. Technology.
It's wonderful till it's not.
Okay, let's see whether this gets back. There we go. Okay, so the next fund is the sewer fund, which basically covers everything in the sewer treatment plant, which is collection, treatment, infrastructure, pipes, the lift stations, and we've actually got a big lift station project this year starting, and treatment plant as well. And the assets are split into restricted assets and then reserves as well. The Capital Works Reserve Fund is our biggest restricted asset. There's a sewer fund, there's a water fund, there's a machinery and equipment fund through which we buy trucks and regular machinery, which doesn't belong to, say, water and sewer. There's a perpetual care reserve fund, which covers the cemetery. There's a fire department reserve, and there is a transit reserve. And soon to be in place, there will be a roads reserve, and we're starting to build our roads because they've been neglected for a while. So that reserve is going to start building, so we can start doing substantial work on roads as well. Asset breakdown, primary, it looks quite small, but primarily the big part of the pie is restricted assets, so they can only be used for the purposes the funds are set aside for. For example, water can only be used for water-related purposes, and capital works in water. The unrestricted assets are generally the surpluses in our general fund and other surpluses which we can use to cover shortfalls and the like of which, and they don't have as many restrictions around them to use that. So breaking out the restricted assets, it breaks it down into Capital Works Reserve Fund, which is the biggest pie, followed by the Water Reserve Fund, which is the next biggest pie, and then sewer and the other reserves as they're starting to build. Okay, 2020 financials. So we have assets and liabilities. Assets include cash and short-term investments, accounts receivable, and taxes and utility receivable. On the other side of the accounts are payable and accrued liabilities, any deferred revenue, which is basically funds received in advance for project starting, and of course our loans. And then there is the water treatment plant short-term loan as well. So fire truck loan and water treatment plant loan. In terms of assets and liabilities, our assets went down from 2018 to 19, about 800,000. Our liabilities also went down about 500,000. Both things have gone down because those things are now getting converted into capital assets, so they're work in progress. So the 8 odd million we are spending on the water treatment plant, that's going into water, and then gets into assets, capital assets. These are just financial assets here. Equity and reserves. Financial equity includes surplus from operations, statutory reserve funds, and reserve funds for future expenditures. Capital equity includes land, buildings, engineering structures, and machinery and equipment. Tangible capital assets. That's where our money is going into. So we had in 2018 about 9 million in tangible assets. 2019 we've ended with 14.6 million in assets. So all these other assets, the work we've been doing, it's going into our tangible capital assets. Revenues and expenses. You want the revenue part of the pie to be bigger than the expense part of the pie. And it was substantially bigger because the revenue of 8 million includes all the grants we were getting. And the expenses some of it is timing of the spending of the grants and how it's going into capital. A lot of times when you buy capital, it's not considered an expense, it's considered addition to assets, as you saw in the last slide. Revenues include municipal taxation, our biggest revenue source, sales of service, and here this year because of COVID, we won't be getting as many sales of service revenue, which is because our arena will shut down or will work limit. Our parks are shut down, so a number of pools shut down. So our revenue from services is definitely going to be much less. So there's an impact to us from there. There's government grants and there's license permits and penalties. So revenue for 2019, government grants was of course the biggest part because of the project, 5.3 million. Municipal taxation was followed by nearly 1.5 million. Sales of services was about 1,057,000, and this includes services. Water and sewer is considered services, so sales of services falls into that. And permits and penalties was 153,000. Expenses include government expenses, general government expenses, protective services expenses, transportation expenses, environmental and public health expenses, recreation and culture, and water and sewer, of course. And that's the breakdown for expenses. We spend the most on water and sewer, followed by actually recreation, and then transportation, general services, and then environment and public. It's quite interesting how much we spend on recreation. We spend a fair chunk of our expenses on recreation. Okay, the 5-year plan. So what is the 5-year plan? It's just projecting this year's budget, which is year 1, and then projecting that going forward. I mean, we know the numbers for year 1 because that's the budget we've been working on, has been presented before, and then it grows from there. One of the key things about this year's budget, we had a budget done up and then COVID hit and we pulled it back and did a 0% increase, so it's basically the same budget as was last year's. So there's no additional, we're doing a 0% increase, so there's no increase in revenues, though there's actually been a hit to revenues, and we're covering it through changes in our operations and working a lot more lean in terms of saving costs. So property taxes are budgeted at 1.263 million, parcel taxes followed by fees and charges. User fees are 855, that's water and sewer. Borrowing proceeds, we're not intending to borrow any more from MFA. And then there's other miscellaneous revenue, and within that other revenues is that big 3.1 million of additional grants coming in anticipated this year. And that is contingent on our work on our projects, and I can tell you we've been working pretty hard getting the projects going. So, despite our limitations, we've been getting things going. So hopefully our grants are going to be coming in on time as well, but the work is definitely going quite well. So the others are transfers back and forth from funds, and transfers from reserve funds to apply to some capital works, and then transfers from equity, which is really covering our amortization, which you'll see on the next side, which matches exactly our amortization cost. So that's a transfer from equity. And then there's a bit of accumulated surplus we'll be using for our works as well. So I'm sorry, I switched back again, and then that projects it to year 2, 3, 4, and 5. And where possible, we try to be conservative in our future estimates. 5-year financial plan, the expense side of this equals the other page. The total expenses will equal total revenue, so there's 0. And here the capital expenditures are the biggest portion, followed by municipal purposes, general municipal 2 million, fire protection, water and sewer. And water is at about 512,000 and sewer at 406,000. Transfer to reserves funds is us setting aside money into reserves, and it's depending on what reserves it's going into. Some money is coming in from reserve, more is going back into reserves, and then amortization expense, which was the same as what I mentioned before. I'll flip back to the transfer from equity. So overall, everything balances, and I'm quite pleased that we've been able to balance things well, as well as keep our projects going, given the year we've been having. So, okay, how are property taxes calculated? That's what the next few slides are about. So, property taxes are based on assessed values. Assessed valuation is determined by British Columbia Assessment Authority. The municipality doesn't determine the assessment. The province body determines the assessment. So we don't have any say in what the assessed values are or what classes various are determined by the province. So we don't have any say in that. What is the British Columbia Assessment Authority? It's an independent provincial crown corporation. Mandate is to establish and maintain uniform real property assessments throughout British Columbia. Assessors determine the market value and enter those values on the assessment roll. So what do we have control over? So this is the equation, A into B equals C. A is our assessment per $1,000, which is determined by the assessment authority. B is the tax rate, and C is the taxes. So what we start is look at the taxes and say, what are the taxes necessary to deal with the coming year? So in this year, we didn't increase any of our taxes. So that amount C remained the same. So we've got A determined, so now B comes out of the equation after we've decided what the taxes are. So the tax rates will come out from what the assessed value is to equal what we want to charge for taxes. Now, your assessment has gone up substantially this year, so the tax rate to equal that, to have the same amount of taxes, has gone down. But on average, you will see no change in your taxes this year. Also remember that 57% of our taxes are for the municipality. The rest are for other provincial bodies, policing, TNRD hospital, school. So we don't determine that. We collect it on their behalf. So the municipal portion, to be more specific, is the one which is going to remain the same on average. Though the good news is that they did reduce some of the other rates as well. So you shouldn't see any substantial increases. So tax summary, in this side, taxes payable, there's no municipal increase. Average assessment is $244,109, increase of 32,930. Average tax increase is 0. At this point, usually with the audience, I get a few questions, but I guess not. We'll wait for the presentation to finish to answer the questions. Assessment information for 2020, revised roll dated March 20th. Busy slide, but basically it's just showing different property classes, and it's the residential classes. Within the residential class, there's different classes, and the total residential. Oh, I forgot to change the date there, 2019 and 2018. But 244,000 for 2019, and 2018 was 211,000. So that's the 32,000 increase. Number of properties have remained pretty stable at 877. I think increase of 2, if I recall from a couple of weeks ago, looking at this. So So average single, this is more of a trend over the years. So we've usually increased it 2.5. We've kept the property tax increases quite moderate because that's been the council's goal, to keep things moderate and not have sudden increases. And you can see that it's usually around 2.5%. This year, there's no increase. So this just shows you the trend over time. Projects, this year's spending. So this is a kind of the overview. The budget was discussed earlier and presented earlier. So water treatment plant, we've moved to phase 2 because we came under budget and we weren't keen to return the money. So we expanded the project scope and we are in phase 2 and work has started. Sewage lift station, we were quite lucky to get a 100% grant for this and we are moving quickly on this. So hot tub is also in progress. It's tough to get contractors to come down to Ashcroft, particularly at this point, but we're working hard to make sure things move along. We're starting to look at quotes for pool roof, which has a leak which needs to be fixed. So we're working on that. Curling club upgrades are also in progress. We were able to get 2 grants for this. One from TNRD and one from NDIT, so which offset the cost, and then we had set aside in conjunction with the curling club reserves, which will also offset the cost, so we are left with the remainder to cover from general municipal operations. We've started working on evacuation route planning. Go into our website and have a look. More work is happening and we should have that done and a report in place, and that has been funded by I can't remember now, but the province basically, 100%. So 25,000 funding there. UBCM. I couldn't remember UBCM. And then, of course, asset management work continues. There's a lot on the website. Anybody interested can go in and look at that. A lot more mapping and GIS on the website as well, and it continues to develop. So lot of big part of our work as well. Now we reach the question stage. This was quick and painless, hopefully.
So for everybody at home, what we're going to do is we're going to give you 3 minutes to come up with any questions that you might have. You can either put them in the comments of this video, or you can email them to me right now at hon@ashcrofthub.com, and we'll start the questions in the 3 minutes time to give everybody a chance to digest what Yogi just talked about and to formulate your questions.
I feel there should be elevator music at this time. But
Go. All right, hello everyone. So thank you all for watching. This is now the question period time. We have had some questions emailed in to us. And again, if you have any questions, you can message in the comments here or email in. So the first questions are from Gloria Mertens, who is at 301 Rattlesnake Road in Ashcroft. So question 1. It was stated at the beginning of this meeting is mandated by the community charter. In light of the fact the 5-year plan and tax rate bylaws have already gone through the readings by council, is there any effect that feedback from the public today will be incorporated in any plans for the upcoming year? Could you elaborate?
Okay, we did present the budget actually multiple times because we had to change it again. So at that time there was feedback. This is first 3 readings, so there's final reading still, and council was present. And if there's something they consider absolutely essential, they can incorporate that. But our budget process is throughout the year, and council is available throughout the year to talk to you and listen to your priorities. So yes, still a last opportunity to change things if we feel it's absolutely necessary for us to do. But by generally this point we are presenting and seeing what the questions lead to. Mayor, would you like to add anything?
Yes, thank you, CFO Bhalla. I would like to just add to that, as CFO Bhalla has said, the budget process, even though the actual drawing up of the budget occupies a certain period of time, the budget process is one that is ongoing throughout the year. We have had the and that was followed up by a committee of the whole meeting, a planning session on the 10th of February. So really the public has been able to look at the budget, the 2020 budget, since January and come back to us with any suggestions, anything they'd like to see, any questions or comments. And then through the rest of the year, we always welcome people. The budget process doesn't just happen in the spring of a given year. If someone has an idea in July or September that they would like to see incorporated in the next year's budget, that's the time to come and talk to us about it, because then council and staff can start planning and discussing it so that when it comes around time for the actual budget discussion in the new year, that's on the table.
And as an example, COVID came after the initial budget was done, and we pulled it back and changed redid the whole budget and changed it to have 0%. And we've definitely, we're operating with one less person in the office to try and manage. So the public doesn't get an increase this year when they're challenged already with other issues. So even in the last minute, things can change if we feel there's a reason. And COVID was one example where we had to pull things back so that we could move on.
My camera actually just died on me here, so you're going to be looking at Yogi for a minute. Question 2 is, according to the mayor's Facebook page advertising this meeting, the virtual town hall was going to present the Village of Ashcroft's yearly budget as well as its 5-year financial plan. There is information about the 5-year plan, but there seems to be no slides for the Village of Ashcroft budget. A budget usually shows details of each account and monetary amounts designated to each of those line items. I am wondering if some slides were missing. If not, could some cost amounts be given for each of the projects listed on the last page? Is there any budget for improving pathways throughout the village, connecting the town's 3 neighborhoods, building a pathway down Evans Road, or making a safe schools pathway?
Was that one question? So the format of this presentation has remained consistent over the years. I can switch back to the slide which shows you the 5-year. That's basically a culmination. The first year, 2020, is the culmination of the budget process and where the lines are on a bigger scale. We don't get into the details because that would be hours long, just as long as the budget session is, where input on the actual details happens. This is the overall view of how things are going. So budget is presented as the first year, and the next 4 years are the projection of that budget. The other part was question about, could you repeat that?
If not, could some cost amounts be given for each of the projects listed in the last page? Is there any budget for improving pathways throughout the village, connecting the town's 3 neighborhoods, building a pathway down Evans Road, or making a safe schools pathway?
Okay, so we'll have to consider that going forward. As far as trails and Evans Path goes, that's come before council, and council has made some decisions regarding that. We are looking at a master trails plan and looking at all the trails around town. Work has already begun. If you go on the website and look at our maps, you'll see some trails are already there. There'll be some photographs going on, and we're looking at collaborating with the Ashcroft Indian Band and getting their trails on there as well. So the work continues. I think I've covered some, so would Your Worship like to add something else?
Certainly, thank you. Looking at the individual costs for the various projects on the final page, some of those have already come up at public meetings, at council meetings. Some of them are still in the early stages, so we still don't actually know what the final cost is going to come in at. The hot tub is a very good example. When we asked for quotes to base our grant application on, we only got 1 quote. So we had to base our grant application on that 1 quote. Now, it could well be when we're in a position to be able to start asking for RFPs or put out an RFP for the hot tub, the work could well come in at less than that. We just do not know at this stage. As far as the trails go, we have considered putting together a trails master plan. That's certainly on our wish list. Every year council has dozens of things on our wish list that we would love to be able to do, but we only have so much capacity. So unfortunately, every year there are worthy projects that we just cannot go ahead with in a given year. The Trails Master Plan is on our list. We would like to do it and do it right so that we do not have a hodgepodge of trails that do not connect up with each other and that may not be engineered properly, that may not be entirely safe. In the meantime, we have started discussions with the Ashcroft Indian Band, not only, as CFO Bhalla said, about including their trails in with the ones that already exist within the village, but doing something to connect those trails up, because the bulk of the trail would be on Ashcroft Indian Band property. They're very keen to break down what has been called the sort of glass barrier that they see between the village of Ashcroft and the Ashcroft Band. And we all feel that having a trail built between Ashcroft, the village, and the band would be an excellent first start. And certainly in this age of COVID-19, physical distancing, allowing people to get exercise and get fresh air but not crowding, that would be a really excellent initiative for us to move forward on.
Okay, moving on to Gloria's next question. According to the presentation, property tax is based on assessed value, and that assessed value is determined by the BC Assessment Authority. If you go onto the BC Assessment site, the assessed value of buildings on the Ashcroft Terminal parcel is over $3 million, which has been for the last 2 years. Which has been for at least 2 years. I believe that Ashcroft Terminal is the only business classified as light industry in the town, so I'm assuming that the assessed value of $155,400 as per the general tax revenue statement presented at the April 27, 2020 regular meeting of Council for Ashcroft Terminal, that being the case, a tax rate of 21.3169 per $1,000 times 155,000 compared with 21.3169 at $1,000 times $3,226,800. $3,226,800 is substantially different. In fact, a difference of $65,000. Please clarify is the light industry company paying its share of taxes based on its assessment?
Okay. The light industry is not the class where the terminal is. I don't like mentioning who's in what class. They're not in that class, so the assumption is incorrect. And they do pay taxes based on their fair share. And how we do taxes is we keep the proportion equivalent and the ratios the same each year. So if I'm increasing residence taxes by 5%, I'm increasing business taxes by 5%.
And last question, could you please explain the parcel taxes in general and the parcel tax projections in the 5-year plan?
Okay, tax on the basis of parcels, and they're generally for services. We have parcel taxes and generally to cover, even more particularly to cover capital costs of the services. We have parcel taxes for water and sewer. Those taxes go towards covering water and sewer. Looking at the 5-year plan, those parcel taxes show an increase in year 3. That is due to us still having our water treatment plant loan, and that incorporates paying some of the interest costs on that loan. We haven't paid it off, but we intend, we are in a good position to pay it off, so that will likely not turn out. But conservatively, we've still kept those parcel taxes. So parcel taxes are there for services based on what service you receive and for the capital portion or the interest portion of that service, and that's how we tax.
Okay, so that is it for... so now I have questions from Dora Winwood. So hi, I have 2 questions and a quick thank you for the success of the water treatment plant in bringing us clean water during this high water turbidity season. My family really appreciates all of your hard work making that project happen. Very forward thinking. So question 1, the presentation slide shows how much residents pay on average for property taxes. I'm wondering what the percentage in actual dollar value amount that industry pays towards the tax base is.
Okay, thank you for your very nice comments. We are working. You're recognizing that. The percentage in terms of, so it's split up among different classes, residents being the biggest for us, but there's a utilities class and light industry is very minimal, and there's a business class. So between the utilities and business class, it's dark here, I'm trying to read. They pay about 35%. No, it's okay.
If we turn on all the lights, that's fine, but you had a big light above your head that was...
Okay, no, it's okay. Okay, I got the numbers now, I can see it. It was about 35%, whereas residences pay about 63%, the rest being split among farm and the other classes. So that proportion, what I was talking about earlier, remains the same. So we don't try and penalize one class for another class. We try and keep that consistent. And I think that's the right way of doing taxes, not trying to have residential homes pay for more at the cost, for somebody else benefiting. So we keep that ratio quite stable throughout the years.
Last question there is, on the project side, you mentioned spending money on the pool and the curling club, both of which are worthy expenditures. But in the light of COVID-19, there is a heightened need for internet connectivity and safe walking/cycling routes, as gathering at sports complexes is currently discouraged. Is there any plan to spend money on the pathway down Evans Road or for trails, as well as a push for fiber optics?
Okay, optics, we have inquired from the providers. They're not very many. And they in turn have asked for a lot of money. We were talking millions. This is not something the village can afford. We keep our eye open for any higher level of government funding. There's some technology changes happening rapidly. Example, satellite deployment networks coming up. So maybe we'll have a bigger broadband internet coming sooner than later to Ashcroft. We always keep our eyes open for it. But as a village, we cannot afford a $2 million price tag to get fiber optic here. That would cost a ridiculous amount of money to each taxpayer. So But wherever possible, the mayor and council, when they have an opportunity at UBCM and other forums, are always bringing the topic up and how important it is for the village to get, for rural areas, to get high-speed internet, fiber optic.
And if I can just address that as well, the provincial government has recently announced some sort of emergency funding for communities, rural communities, which are struggling with broadband issues in the COVID-19 response. And something that's really come to light, especially with the students homeschooling, is that there is a very real, it's really hammering home the disparity between the larger urban communities that have good, fast, high-speed internet and the smaller rural communities that don't, because students are being told you can go online to do your schooling, we'll give you a data stick and you can take it home and download things. And for a lot of urban students, this just is, or rural students, I'm sorry, this is just not working. So I really think that, especially with people saying, after we get through COVID-19, the face of education could be changing, the face of working at home could be changing with more of both. I think both those both those developments are going to go a long way to spurring an investment in high-speed internet in rural communities to make it more equitable and to encourage more people to do this from home. As for Dora, your question about the Evans Road Trail, we have touched on that. We do want to make sure that trails that we develop are part of a master plan. The Ashcroft Terminal is going to be holding public meetings or striking a committee to look at access to that whole area. So I think the thing to do is to wait and see what the Evans Road walking trail might look like as part of a bigger picture. And the other thing that makes the Evans Road Trail or a pathway along there unique is that most of the other trails that we talk about in Ashcroft, or we already have, are away from roads. You have to park and walk into them, or you park and go along them. Evans Road is along a very busy public road with lots of industrial traffic. So that is an added wrinkle that really has to be considered, that you don't have to consider when you're planning one through the Ashcroft Indian Band Reserve, for example.
That's all the current questions that we have. What I would like to do is take another 2-minute break. And if anybody at home has a watch party going on, if you're getting comments on this video, we are not seeing them. So you have to comment on the video on the Hub Online Network page for us to see your question. Or, again, email us at ho1@ashcrofthub.com. We're going to give 2 minutes, 2 more minutes, just to get any last questions, if there are any. And then we will call it a night. Okay, so we have Daniel Collette on the phone. He has a question, and go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, okay. It's Daniel Collette, by the way, just so that you know. Yeah. Okay, so I was listening to what Dora said about the Evans Road path idea and connecting it up. I understand how it has to become part of a master plan, and but to further that idea a little bit is that there's a really large contingent of people in the area interested in access to the slough.
So we have Daniel Blood on the phone. He has a question. Go ahead, Daniel. Can you mute your computer?
Okay, so I was listening to what Dora said about the Evans Road path.
Daniel, can you mute your computer?
I understand how it has. I'm at the computer.
Yeah, we can hear. Oh, okay. That was Daniel. I'm assuming he's going to call back after his computer is muted, so we'll give him a minute to do that. But seeing no more questions beyond Daniel's, after Daniel's question, if he phones back, we'll give him a minute. We're going to call it a night. And right now, I guess it's a good time to say thank you to Yogi for everything that he's done, and to the council. Let me bring up the council here. You can't see everyone. You can just see the mayor, but there are other council members in the gallery, and thank you to them. This has been. Oh, we do have another question from Marietta Lang. Why has the ban not been lifted for backyard fires?
I can take that one. The ban on open burning in the village of Ashcroft is a bylaw. So in order to allow any kind of open burning within the village, that bylaw would have to be looked at again, would have to be considered. There would have to be public input into that. And then the bylaw, if appropriate or if deemed appropriate, would have to be amended and go through a process. It has to be because it's a bylaw. And there has to be public input into that process because that's how our government works. So that is something that has been brought to the table again. It has been put to one side for the time being, largely because of that public input factor. It is extremely difficult right now to have that kind of full and frank discussion that you would need to have with members of the public there with the physical distancing rules and the strictures on public gatherings. So we're waiting for such a time as the public will be able to have a meaningful part in looking at that bylaw and deciding if there are any changes to be made to it, and if so, what those changes might look like.
We do have Daniel back on the phone. Daniel, go ahead.
Yeah, can everybody hear me now?
Yes.
Okay, well that's good. I couldn't hear you well. I thought you were saying move the computer, and I was thinking, why the heck would I move the computer?
And I was saying mute. We could hear the video in the background.
I get that now. Okay, so my comment and my question was about access to the slough, because I was queuing off of what Dora said about that the pathway down Evans Road, and there's a really large group of people in and around the town that are interested in getting back to access to that slough that's at that area down by the slough, and for 5 or 6 generations of people have been going down there. So what I'm at, my question is the Ashcroft Village Council going to support that, at least in principle, if not with funding in the future? And they don't have to answer that right now, but I just want to put that out there because it is an awesome thing, and I think there will be some solutions that can be found, and the start of that, I guess, is that group that hopefully I'll be part of, that we will be meeting and coming up with some ideas. So that was my question in short, I guess.
Okay, well, we're going to hang up on you now, but there will be an answer on the video for you in about 15 seconds.
Okay.
All right.
Thank you.
Thank you, Daniel.
I'll start a little bit. Yeah, the village, the public road ends basically when the pavement ends right before the terminal, and we have a sign which says the public road ends. The village has no authority over private lands. That is a discussion with terminal. The idea of Evans Road path has been brought on, and we have some unique challenges, as the mayor mentioned earlier, with that path, the traffic, the port traffic there, how narrow it is, being right on the river, the fisheries involvement. There's a number of challenges and issues there which have to be resolved just for that path. Beyond that, we don't have a say on the private land, but I'll hand it over to the mayor for more strategic side of things. I'm just talking the from my end, the financial end, where we have any control over.
As CFO Bhalla says, and hello Daniel, as CFO Bhalla says, we have no jurisdiction once it goes onto private property. I think it's excellent that the Ashcroft terminal is recognizing the desire of a lot of people to have some sort of access to the slough. I'm glad to see that they're going to be entering into discussions to see what could possibly happen out there. But it is private property. It has actually been private property for a long time. Previous owners perhaps turned a blind eye to people going out to the slough. But quite apart from the fact that it is private property owned by the Ashcroft terminal and is an industrial site with a lot of heavy equipment and trains going through it, in order to get to the slough, most of the access points involve crossing the CN main line. So CN is probably going to have to be involved in this discussion in some way as well, because there is currently no crossing at any point on the CN main line, and CN crossing the tracks where there is no crossing is a finable offense with a very hefty fine. So there are huge danger implications of people going across the tracks where there are no crossings on an industrial site. So as I said, I think it's really important, and it's a good step forward that the Ashcroft terminal is engaging or looking to engage the community to talk about this issue, which has been simmering for a long time, and see if we can find a way forward and see what the solutions might look like.
All right. Is there anything else that the council would like to add before we have no more new questions at the time?
Well, I just would like to say on behalf of the Village of for facilitating this and enabling this to happen. It's a challenging time for a lot of small local governments which are not used to doing anything except the way we've always done it. And the way we've always done it has not included live streaming and Facebook comments. So I think this has been an interesting experience for all of us. Thanks to the HON for enabling us to do this and bring it to the public. I think we might have had more people join us virtually than would actually come out to a meeting. And certainly if that's the case, and if the feedback we get is good, and if you have feedback, please let the village know, because we would like to know, apart from the technical difficulties, what your experience was with this, how satisfactory you found it, and if this is something that you would like to see us do more of going forward with public meetings, because that is certainly something that we could consider and have discussions about. So thank you for letting it happen, and thank you to everyone out there in virtual in cyberland who's watching us.
Seeing no new questions, I believe that calls it a night. Do you have to hit the gavel or anything?
I can hit the gavel. There we go. I hit the gavel. So thank you all for coming.